This is the second video in our multi-part series, Does the Bible Say the Earth is Flat? In this video, we will take a close look at Psalm 33 verse 7, which attempts to explain why ships will sink below the horizon even if the earth is flat. Psalm 33:7 says, quote, God heaps up the ocean waters like a mound. This video will dig deeply into the physics and geometry that would cause an ancient poet to make this statement, and will also explain why this verse fits into the larger question, does this prove that the Bible says the earth is flat? For more than 2,000 years, since the time of Aristotle, no educated society has taken seriously the idea that the earth might be flat. Nevertheless, although the Christian Church has never officially required anyone to believe that the earth was flat, many Christians have continued to believe in a flat earth. Where did they get this idea? Did they get it from the Bible? Did the Bible's writers believe in a flat earth? Most Christians say no, but some Christians have a different point of view. In the last couple of decades, a rapidly growing movement has emerged within conservative Christianity, claiming that the Bible teaches that the earth is as flat as a pancake. These conservative, Bible-believing Christians are well organized and have created many very professional-looking websites. This is just a partial list. They have also published many detailed, extensively documented, well-illustrated books, DVDs, and online videos. These are just a few of the ones that have been published in the past couple of decades. This has caused great distress among biblical creationists who believe that the Christian God created the entire universe slightly more than 6,000 years ago, but also believe in a spherical earth. Why should this bother creationist Christians so much? Don't flat earth Christians have the same right to promote their interpretation of the Bible that creationist Christians do? Maybe, just maybe, creationist Christians are upset because the flat earth Christians have borrowed many of their arguments and tactics from creationist Christians. Here's a short list of some of the main arguments that creationist Christians will often use to promote their creationist, young earth creationism beliefs. These arguments work just as well and make just as much sense for flat earth Christianity as they do for creationist Christianity. But do flat earth Christians even have an argument? Does the Bible really say that the earth is flat? Surprisingly, the flat earth Christians' biblical arguments are strong enough that Bible-believing Christians should really give them some serious thought. In this 6-video series, we will discuss 6 different Bible-based arguments for a flat earth. Each video will discuss a different argument. Links to the other videos in this series are in the YouTube description for this video and on our website. This video will discuss whether Psalm 33 verse 7 proves that the Bible says that the earth is flat. Before we dig deeply into Psalm 33:7, first we have to decide what it says. The New American Standard and King James both say God gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. The Hebrew English Tonic, a modern Jewish translation, says God heaps up the ocean waters like a mound. And the New International Version says God gathers the waters of the sea into jars, with a footnote that jars can also be translated heap. The New International Version is a bit different because of disagreements over some ancient Hebrew vowels which do not appear in the oldest manuscripts. The idea is the same in all translations. God gathers up the waters of the sea and keeps them from flowing where he does not want them to go. I am not a Hebrew scholar, so I'm not going to dig deeply into the reasons why the translators translated these verses the way they did. But we have to pick a translation to work with, so I will pick the Jewish translation because the verse that we are interested in is from the Old Testament, and it is very similar to many Christian translations such as the King James Bible and the New American Standard Bible. The idea that God sets boundaries for the oceans is a common theme in the Bible. For example, Job 26:10 says God drew a boundary on the surface of the waters. Psalm 104 verse 9 says God set boundaries that the seas must not pass so that they never again cover the earth. Proverbs 8:29 says God assigned the sea its limits so that the waters never transgress his command. And Jeremiah 5:22 says God, who set the sand as a boundary to the sea, as a limit for all time, not to be transgressed. These verses all have a common theme. They are all saying that if God did not exercise a continuous effort to restrain the oceans, seawater would very quickly flood over most or all of the dry land on earth. This is not a problem because the Bible clearly and repeatedly says that God has the power to easily do this. In fact, Christians believe that God invented gravity, which usually keeps the oceans exactly where we want them to be. Now, let's focus on Psalm 33:7 itself. Psalm 33:7 says, quote, God heaps up the ocean waters like a mound. To our modern minds, this is a very strange thing to say. We all know that gravity causes the ocean, like any fluid, to flow down, not up, until it reaches the lowest possible point. The seas are, on average, flatter than the surface of the earth. If God created gravity, why would the psalmist say that God would need to, or even want to, heap up the ocean waters like a mound? The answer is found in an ancient explanation for an interesting physical phenomenon. The physical phenomenon has been well known since before the beginning of written human history. A ship that is sailing away from a viewer gets progressively smaller. But for a while, if the viewer's eyes are good enough, the viewer could still see as much of it as he could see when it was closer. But after a while, the observer would no longer see the whole ship. The hull sinks below the horizon before the rest of the ship does. Here's where it would get really weird if you were someone living thousands of years ago when everyone believed that the earth was flat. Just after the ship had slipped below the horizon and you could no longer see it, if you were to go to a higher place, such as the top of a house or a hill, you could see the ship again. Today, we know that this is because the earth is a sphere. Here is an illustration from a book that was published in the 1200s, over 800 years ago, showing why this works. In fact, there is a precise mathematical way to calculate just how far your horizon is away from you. We show you how to use this equation in video number 1 of this series. If our ancient observer was standing on the ground and was about average height for the time, his eyes would be about 5 feet off the ground, and his horizon would be about 3 miles away. But if our observer walked to the second story of a building so that now his eyes were now 25 feet off the ground, his horizon would be 6 miles away. So he would be able to see much, much more. Now, let's assume that it was over 2,500 years ago and you did not know that the earth was round. You thought that the earth was flat. How would you explain the fact that ships would disappear over the horizon the way they do if the earth is flat? Let's take another look at our video simulation. It looks just like the boat is going up and over a hill. A ship at sea looks and disappears exactly the same way as a horse going up a hill. Based on your valid observation that objects traveling on the sea disappeared the same way as objects traveling over a hill, and your invalid belief that the earth was flat, you would very logically conclude that the sea had to be shaped like a hill. Specifically, This leads to three conclusions. First, the sea slopes upward beginning at the shore. Second, the sea is higher than the shore and possibly higher than most dry land. Third, an unknown power, or a supernatural power, keeps the sea from flowing downhill over the shore and other dry land. But this explanation only makes sense if the earth is flat. If the earth is a sphere, the curvature is provided by the earth itself. The ocean hill theory is disproved by the fact that the earth is a sphere that has curvature. But is it possible for both of these to be true? Can the earth be a sphere and the oceans be higher than the land? The answer is no. Psalm 33:7 cannot be interpreted literally. The oceans cannot be higher than the land. This is for several reasons. First, this equation would not work if the oceans were higher than the land, and we know that this equation works. Second, the laws of gravity would work differently on the sea than they would on the land. But we know that the laws of gravity work the same way whether you are on the land or on the sea. And third, ships in seas with no tides or very small tides, like the Mediterranean, would always slide downhill toward the shore, unless the ship's engines constantly applied an opposite force. In seas with tides, such as the Atlantic or Pacific Oceans, ships would also slide downhill toward the shore, but this sliding would vary with the tides. Very clearly, Psalm 33:7 cannot be interpreted literally. It's nice poetry, but it's bad science. And the reason is because the earth is a sphere. This did not stop many well-educated and highly respected Christian theologians. After the earth was proved to be a sphere by overwhelming scientific and geographical evidence, many famous Christian theologians, after careful prayers asking God to help them communicate divine truth in their books and sermons, have continued to interpret this verse completely literally. Here are just a few examples. John Calvin is still one of the most famous and most well-respected Christian theologians. Writing in the 1500s, after humans had sailed around the earth, Calvin wrote these words in his commentary on Psalm 33:7, quote, "Natural philosophers, that is, scientists, confess and experience openly proclaims that the waters occupy a higher place than the earth. God has enclosed the waters within certain invisible barriers and keeps them shut up to this day. They stand still at God's commandment as if they were a heap of firm and solid matter." In the 1600s, John Trapp, the famous English Anglican theologian, said, quote, "Behold another mercy of God, without which the earth would be uninhabitable unless by fishes only, because the waters would cover the earth. This, Psalm 33:7, showeth that the sea is higher than the earth. Sailors observe that their ships move faster to the shore than from it. Whereof what other reason can be given, but the height of the waters above the land?" Also writing in the 1600s, English theologian Matthew Poole said, "As a heap, by which expression he, the writer of Psalm 33, brings to our minds this great work of God, that the sea, which is lighter and higher than the earth, is yet confined within its bounds, that it might not overflow the earth." John Gill, an English Baptist theologian, writing in the 1700s, said, "The waters of the sea were piled up as a heap, and stood higher than the earth, as they do now, and which is a wonderful instance of the power and providence of God, to bound them and preserve the earth from being overflowed by them." Writing in the 1800s, Thomas Coke, a Methodist theologian and one of the founders of the Methodist Church, said, "Water being specifically lighter than the earth, by the common laws of gravitation, it should rise above and overflow it. And then the adjusting the proportion of the tides, so that they rise no higher to the prejudice of the lower grounds, is another remarkable instance of God's special providence. Presbyterian theologian Albert Barnes was a graduate of Princeton Seminary. In his commentary on Psalm 33:7, he said, "The powers by which the waters are gathered and kept together, the continual power which prevents their overspreading the earth, God collected those waters and kept them in their places, as if they were solid matter." This denotes a most striking illustration of God's power. Barnes's Bible commentaries sold over 1 million copies between 1828 and 1870. Lutheran theologians Carl Friedrich Kiel and Franz Delitzsch, writing in the late 1800s, said, "The display of God's power in the waters of the sea consists in his having confined them within fixed bounds, like such a heap do the convex waters of the sea, being firmly held together, rise above the level of the continents." And the pulpit commentary, containing writings from over 100 conservative Christian theologians and published in 1890, says, "The original gathering and continued retention of the sea in one mass were great proofs of God's omnipotence." So we see that many of history's most well-respected Christian theologians, writing over a time period of over 400 years, and as recently as 130 years ago, claim some remarkably wrong things based on Psalm 33:7. First, they claim that Psalm 33:7 is literally true. Second, they claim that the oceans are higher than the dry land on the continents. Third, they claim that this is proof of God's power and mercy, because God must exert constant force to keep the oceans from overflowing the continents. Before I summarize and conclude, there's one more thing. As we have seen, the Bible itself and numerous Christian authors claim that if God did not restrain the oceans, they would float over most or all of the earth, because the oceans are higher than the land. Science now tells us that gravity holds the oceans in place and that the oceans are lower than just about all of the land. Christians say this is no problem because God created gravity, and gravity is the tool that God uses to hold the oceans in place. Okay, so what would happen if God made gravity suddenly disappear? Would the oceans suddenly flood all of the continents like the Bible and many Christian theologians say that it would? The answer is no. If God decided to make gravity suddenly disappear from the oceans, the centrifugal force of the Earth's rotation would fling the oceans into space. Their direction would be away from the Earth, tangential to the Earth's rotation. To an observer on Earth, the oceans would appear to rise straight up. They would not flood the continents. The explanation for this is highly mathematical and involves some college-level physics, which probably will not interest most viewers. So instead of putting it in the video, we're going to post a more detailed description of this on our website. That's about enough information for one video. Let's briefly review what we've covered. In summary, we have seen that first, Psalm 33:7 says that God heaps up the oceans like a mound. Second, Psalm 33:7 is an attempt to explain the fact that large objects appear to sink below the horizon on the ocean. Third, this explanation in Psalm 33:7 only works if you assume two things. First of all, you assume that the earth is flat. The second assumption that makes this explanation work is that you have to assume that the oceans are higher than the land. Fourth, many well-respected Christian theologians claim that Psalm 33:7 is literally true, that Psalm 33:7 says the oceans are higher than the land, and that it means that God must exert constant force to keep the oceans from overflowing the continents. And last, this explanation makes predictions that are disproved by observations. We know, for example, that the laws of gravity do not work differently on the sea than on the land. They're the same. We know that ships in the Mediterranean and other seas with small or no tides do not slide downhill toward the shore. We know that an exact mathematical equation precisely predicts the rate at which objects appear to sink below the horizon, when only the radius of the spherical Earth is used. This equation gives wrong results when any non-zero ocean heap value or function is included. Fourth, the oceans are not higher than the vast majority of the land on islands and continents. And fifth, we know that the Earth is not flat. Does Psalm 33:7 say that the Earth is flat? We hope we have given you enough information to make a well-informed decision. Thank you for watching our video. Just a friendly reminder that this video is one of a multi-part series. Links to the other videos in this series are in the YouTube description for this video, on our YouTube channel, and on our website. For more interesting videos and more interesting information about the Bible and Christianity, please visit our website, freethinkersbooks.com. If you liked our video, please click the YouTube like icon, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share our video with your friends. Thanks again.